Ametis Bassir. I am an LPC. I'm one of the counselors here at Eden's Counseling Group. I am a doctoral candidate as well, and I am an individual and couples therapist. So I do 50% of both. So I see couples and individuals for trauma work. My specialties lie in eating disorders, body image, women's issues, and couples and relationships. So today's focus of our topic is going to be how to reconnect with your spouse or partner, however you kind of share the name for your significant other. So we will have some time for questions at the end. I've hopefully made a little time for that. So if you do have a question, you can pop it into the chat and just type it out, or you can just hold it until the end. I'll make some time at the end if you have any questions about what we go over or anything else that you want to ask. I'm happy to help and see if I can answer them. So let's go ahead and get started. So our objectives are to learn 3 research-based pillars of what makes relationships strong. I think that's the number one thing I always get from couples is like, what makes a strong relationship? And then what makes relationships deteriorate? Also learning ways that creates disconnection with your spouse or partner. That's often a question I get a lot as well. Like, what happens? Like, what makes us or gets us to the point where we feel disconnected? Myths about relationships and some truths about that, as well as 7 strategies that help to improve your relationship. All of what we'll discuss tonight comes from the Gottman Institute. I am trained, level 3 trained in Gottman method. I'm in the process of hopefully getting certified. And the Gottman method is a type of couples therapy. The Gottmans have done over 40 plus years, so almost 4 decades of research on couples' intimate relationships. And so all of this is really research-based. It comes straight from the data. So I wanted to provide you guys with the utmost information that is relevant, that is predominantly from empirically supported evidence. So what creates disconnection? I think I get this question a lot, or inherently, I think I get it from couples a lot. So I'm sure everybody may have some ideas of what that might look like. And it probably is a combination of a lot of things. From the research, from a lot of different types of couples modalities, really the highlighting or overarching theme is that couples don't feel connected. They don't feel attached. They don't feel emotionally intimate with one another. They don't feel like they know each other. And that creates disconnect, right? It feels like you're not attached, you're not close, you don't understand each other, you don't get each other. And the more that grows, the more outside influences, trauma, loss, grief, COVID, those types of things can get into our relationship and even bridge that disconnection even further. So we feel further away from our partner. We don't know what their world looks like. We don't understand them. And we don't feel understood oftentimes. So that's really the kind of overarching reason why most couples feel maybe disconnected or detached from their partner, why they feel so far away. So the 3 pillars we'll go over, again, these are all based on research, and I've tried to kind of hone them down because there's so much that I could present and I wanted to include as much information, but I also didn't want to bombard the audience with too much at one time. So I've really brought it down to the top 3 pillars of what makes a relationship strong. Number 1, friendship, which I think some of my couples that I see are surprised by this. But really, I mean, it's about treating our partner like we are best friends. We know each other so well, right? It's about learning what's happening and going on in your partner's world. I think oftentimes for couples, we do a really, really good job of being attentive, being very interested, being very open, being very curious in the early stages of a relationship, when there's sparks, when the intensity is higher, when the honeymoon period is around. And sometimes over time, we fail at checking in with our partner, or we may fail to respond when they make attempts to connect with us. So we'll kind of talk about those attempts at connection a little bit later in the slides. But one way that we can practice doing that, practice building friendship with our partner, is asking open-ended questions about what's going on in their internal world. So meaning their own thoughts, their feelings, their hopes and dreams and fears, because some of those may stay the same, like, what is your partner's favorite flower? Perhaps that might stay the same, right? So, come her birthday or Valentine's Day or something like that, you know what to get them. But that might change if you are starting a family, if you're looking to buy a house together, if you're having struggles in work or school. So over time, those fears or dreams might change. And if we don't check in and ask about that, we might not be clued into what's going on internally for them. And we're not mind readers. We can't anticipate or assume what's going on for our partners. We've got to ask. There's such an interesting data that came from the Gottmans that over the last 40 years, they kind of clump the masters of relationships, the masters, and the disasters as people or couples who are not effective in their relationships. And they noticed through their research that masters made over 86% of the time made attempts to connect with their partner, versus disasters only made 33 attempts, which they called bids for connection. Meaning, a really good example is, let's say your partner's in the bathroom, like maybe brushing their hair, and you walk by and you see, that maybe they look sad or they look concerned. And they ask you, hey, do you have some time tonight to talk about this? In that moment, your partner is really asking you, hey, can we connect? Maybe they're assuming or wanting you to connect with them. Let's talk about something. That's a way to connect, right? That's their bid. They're asking for something from you. They're asking for a need. That's what the Gottmans really found, that the masters in relationships turn to their partner almost 90% of those times, right? So you see where that builds friendship, it builds trust. My partner's there for me when I need them. They understand me. They know when I need something. They're attentive. They get me. So that was an interesting piece from the research that they found, and they bring up masters and disasters through a lot of their research, and we'll kind of reference that throughout the slides as well. Second pillar is handling conflict gently. Now, this might seem counterintuitive, and in fact, it's meant to be, because handling conflict in a gentle and positive way can be really difficult. And I think oftentimes people are like, what do you mean? Like, we're in a fight or we're in an argument. Like, sometimes it's going to get heated. And the idea is that, of course, it's heated. Of course, you're going to have strong emotions about whatever the topic is or the issue that's at hand. What we want to avoid, and this is what disasters did much of the time, was use criticism. So criticizing your partner, putting them down, maybe making fun of them, being sarcastic, being defensive. So defensiveness, not taking responsibility, maybe blaming the other partner, acting superior, which is contempt. That's really what that means. But acting superior as if you know better, you know more than your partner. In some ways, you're in a higher role or position than them. Or shutting down. So either staying quiet, not speaking up, walking away, things like that. And oftentimes disasters in relationships did that in a 8-0 ratio, meaning the number of encounters were 0 positive to 8 negative. So more often than not, they are having negative interactions, if not all of the time. The masters, on the other hand, in conflict, showed mutual respect. So listening to each side of the story, right? Your perspective and your partner's respect in a respectful manner, showing interest, that you actually are very interested and curious in their point of view and their understanding of the topic or issue that's at hand. Being open, being willing to hear, being willing to be wrong, right? If you've done something wrong or maybe has said something that you didn't mean to say, taking responsibility for that. Oftentimes the masters used humor, in a way that was mutually understood by the other partner, and then acknowledge and accepted their partner's ideas, feelings, and influence. And so that's what that means. Really being interested and accepting. If my partner is suggesting something, I want to listen. I'm interested in that. I pay attention. It's meaningful to me. And the masters, on the other hand, versus the disasters, had 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions. So you saw with the disasters, 0 to 8. So they had 0 positive encounters to 8 negative. Masters had 5 positive to 1 negative. So more often than not, they were engaging in positive interactions where they were affirming each other, showing love, affection, respect, humor, to the one scenario where they may have had a conflict. So you see how big of a gap this is in terms of conflict management. And it's such an important facet of couples work in general. But I pulled this quote from Dr. John Gottman, the founder of the Gottman Institute and of the Gottman method of couples therapy. And he says, conflict is an opportunity to learn how to love each other better over time. And I chose this because I often think that couples who come to see me feel that conflict is a bad thing. And it's really not. The way that we handle conflict can be negative, yes. Our dynamics can be dysfunctional. The way we speak to each other can be disrespectful, can be demeaning, can be negative. But conflict is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn about something that's going on either within you or your partner that over time helps you to understand each other better and become closer. I mean, that's the irony, right? Oftentimes people think that conflict, splits you apart, makes you further away from your partner. And that only happens if you're engaging in some of those things that I mentioned the disasters fall into: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, or shutting down. If you manage conflict and communicate appropriately with your partner, it often actually brings you closer, feeling like you're connected. You understand them at a deeper level. You get why they're upset. You understand where that comes from. You know how to move forward together in a productive way. And oftentimes that can really build intimacy, can build trust. And so that's why I just mentioned how important, conflict can be in relationship building. And finally, the last pillar is repairing negative interactions. This is one of the most important relationship skills, most important. Because even in their research, they found that even couples who use sarcasm, which could be considered criticism to some people, even couples who use sarcasm in a way of humor, right, where their partner really understood that interaction, they understood the humor and the joke, that's a repair attempt, right? That's a way to diffuse the situation and be able to repair conflicts or negative interactions. So this could look really different for every couple. I mean, any couple that walks into my door could look really, really different. The idea is not maybe necessarily has to look a certain way, but it has to be received by both parties. So both people have to feel like they really understand the attempt and they are experiencing that, okay, my partner gets, I get it. They get it. I get it. That level of ease or relaxation falls upon them, right? So taking responsibility, even if it's only for part of the problem, such a difficult one, I think. Such a difficult one, because it's really about dropping your agenda. It's just that, these repair attempts tend to work because partners, tend to not work when partners don't feel close or accepted or safe. If you're able to take responsibility for only part of the problem, right? It says that we're both in this together. Not you or I are wrong. Every situation and conversation between you and your partner is a dynamic. We both bring in something to that dynamic, right? It's so difficult for people to take responsibility and not get defensive. It's one of the hardest things I think I come across. Because part of it for some people is that they want to avoid conflict altogether. But we can't do that. It's unrealistic because we have conflict, and it's not about avoiding it. It's not about even maybe resolving it. It's about making repair attempts to say that this is important. Whatever the situation is that is coming up, obviously it's important to one or both of you. So the idea is that you want to be able to repair directly when you feel like something has gone amiss. And a couple's ability to repair is really directly related to the strength of their relationship. If you feel very close with your partner, if you feel loved and you feel trust, you feel safe, much easier to make repair attempts because you're willing to take responsibility, let your guard down, not be defensive. You tend to not be critical of the other person, and you tend to not shut down because you want to stay connected. So it is much more difficult for couples who do not feel like, and the strength of their relationship is not strong. Oftentimes, distressed couples have just as many repair attempts as happy couples. So it's not about the number of repair attempts, right? It's actually the quality of the repair attempt. So in a lot of ways, both distressed couples or happy couples have the same number of repair attempts, really. But through their research, they found that happy couples just oftentimes have more productive or more quality in their repair attempts. And through their research, 69% of problems that couples face are really unsolvable. And what I mean by that is that it's the idea that this could be personality traits that maybe rub you the wrong way about your partner. It could be long-standing issues like saving money or spending money. But the research finds that there's an emphasis in the idea that couples have to learn to manage conflict, not avoid it or attempt to eliminate it, but just manage the expectations and manage the way they communicate around it so it's effective, it's productive, and you feel like you grow closer to your partner. So now we get into the myths about relationships. So myth number 1, relationships are always equal. So not true, because it's not 50-50. It's 100 and 100. You both are 100% invested in a relationship. Keeping a running tally or a tit for tat sort of thing with your partner is a sign of trouble and can kind of form resentments towards your partner if you feel like, well, they did this or I did this, so they should be doing this. If you're keeping track of what they're doing and what you're doing, not a good sign. Affairs are the root cause of divorce. So a lot of people think that this is a truth. It is actually a myth. So 2 psychologists found that 80% of divorced men and women cited that it actually was growing apart and a loss of sense of closeness to their partner that was actually the reason for their divorce, as opposed to less than 27% or 20 to 27% blaming it on infidelity or extramarital affairs or betrayals. So I think this just supports kind of what we're talking about of if you feel distant emotionally from your partner in terms of closeness, that is, well, as they found, 80% of divorced people found that that was the reason for their pursuing divorce proceedings. Conflict's a bad sign. We just kind of touched on that, but this is a myth because conflict's inevitable in all relationships, no matter what. Can't avoid it, can't go around it. All relationships require work. It is not easy. And I think a lot of couples come into my room and oftentimes suggest that it should be easy, and it's not. It's not meant to be easy. You're two different people trying to create a life, meaning, and experience together. Like we sort of saw in the last slides, conflict usually arises because you're missing each other. You're missing attempts to communicate, especially if one person is attempting to get emotionally closer to the other, and maybe the other is getting defensive or backing away. And that can cause even more conflict if you feel like you're not communicating effectively, if you're missing each other. Excuse me. Number 4, what couples fight about most is sex, money, and in-laws. Also false, but this is a very common one, and it's a little funny. But couples mostly fight about nothing. It's sort of ironic, I guess. But there's no like common thread. That's what I mean. They could literally argue about anything, which means it's nothing because there's no commonality. The commonality is that most conflicts arise from failed bids to connect with your partner emotionally. So I gave the example of, if your partner was kind of brushing their hair and they turn to you and say, hey, do you have a minute to talk? You can either turn towards them, right, and say, yes, of course I can make time for that. Or turn away and say, nope, don't have time for that. In that moment, is it a deal breaker for your relationship? I mean, depends if you're on good ground or not, but maybe not. What happens is those things happen over time. The more often you turn away, the more often you'll probably do that in the future, and that creates emotional distance from your partner. Number 5, love is enough. Also false. No love is perfect. It's not without flaws. And certainly I think people don't count that, yes, romance is so fun. Great sex, fun, adventure, right? All of these things are a priority when you're courting your partner, which often is in the first month to a year, roughly. But as a relationship goes on, right, you build closeness and habituation happens. You get familiar. And oftentimes that's when we don't practice courting our partner as much. And that is absolutely needed. One, to develop that close friendship that we talked about, but it shows that you have interest. You're continuously pursuing your partner. It goes back to number 1, relationships are equal. It's never equal. You're always pursuing your partner. You're never get into a place where you're comfortable and say, oh, this is good. Everybody wants to be pursued and feel like they are a priority, right, to their partner. We have, as we get older, we might have endless to-do lists. We're caring for family members, children, right? It's endless. If we don't make intentional time, right, to make our relationship a priority, it will deteriorate. And that kind of goes into number 6. And part of why I thought this lecture or, talk was really important is if a relationship requires therapy, it's too late. That's such a myth, and it's not. There was a survey done that over 900,000 people who got divorced, that's the average, almost 1 million people a year get divorced. Fewer than 10% of the number ever went to talk to a professional or went to therapy. Don't be that 10%. Don't be that 10%. Come to therapy. It is so beneficial, and it can help, and no matter what the time is, no matter where you are. And this kind of leads into some strategies that some of you and all of you can kind of take away and implement into your relationships now. So here are some 7 ways to improve your relationship. Seek help early. Here we are, stemming from our last slide. So like I said, right, out of the 900,000 people who get divorced annually in the US, only less than 10% of them have gone to therapy. And according to the Gottman Institute, the average couple waits over 6 years on average before seeking relationship help. That's a long time, normally. And so here's some statistics here about like half of marriages that end do so within the first 7 years. So you see like it kind of overlaps. They wait about 6 years. 7 years is roughly the average of how long people stay married. And the average couple lives with unhappiness for a fairly long time. Again, these are all statistics from the Gottman Institute that they took. Some red flags that you might want to look out for are persistent arguments with the inability to dialogue. Like I said, conflict is not a bad thing. It is necessary, unavoidable. The tricky part is when those arguments or conflict become persistent and you're not able to dialogue, meaning you're not able to talk about what's going on, what's wrong, without hitting a lot of roadblocks, without hitting those roadblocks, like I mentioned, the criticism, contempt, defensiveness, or shutting down. Feeling disrespected by your partner. That's a huge one. If you don't feel respected, you don't feel like an equal, you don't feel like you're a priority or taken care of. If you feel disconnected emotionally, right? This is, we go back to the statistic we talked about earlier that 80% of divorced people said that they feel disconnected and that's why they ended the relationship with their partner. So it just kind of solidifies in my mind that seek help early. Seek help when you first see red flags, when you first notice things are maybe off or feel like you're not connected. Editing yourself. I like this one. This kind of goes back to what do the masters in relationships do? The masters in relationships, most successfully, are kind to one another. They're gentle, they're kind, they're caring. They think about what's coming out of their mouth. They stop and pause and wait to say what they need to say, and they edit themselves. Certainly, are there times that we are talking to our partner and we're like, oh my God, I can't believe they're thinking that, but don't say it out loud. That's what I mean. Edit yourself. Don't say that out loud because that comes off as critical, right? Or that comes off as judgmental, right? It's like editing ourselves of, I'm interested. This person has something valuable to me and I care about them. I want to give them respect. I want to give them the mutual respect they deserve. So I want to listen to them and I want to be careful with my words. Yes, it can be difficult, of course, if you have big emotions, but that's part of our role, right? When we go into a dialogue with our partner is managing our own emotions. Huge part, right? We can only control what comes out of our mouth and our mind and say what we need to say. It's important you watch what you say to your partner because you can't take it back. You can apologize, but trust me, you cannot take it back, and those words can be weapons. Avoid criticism or blaming in discussions, right? We talked about this a little bit earlier, that the disasters in relationships often use criticism, contemptuous words, and blaming when they were speaking with their partner, right? Especially around maybe touchy or sensitive topics. Express your needs and concerns respectfully. I don't think I can say any of this enough because it's so important that we're showing our partner that they deserve respect and kindness and empathy and understanding. Remember, you're in a relationship with this person, right? They're not your enemy. They're not this bad person. You're meant to be partners together. You're meant to be spouses. Together, you are working towards the same goal. You are in a relationship. This is not like your enemy on the other side of like the playground who you're like trying to battle, right? And I think sometimes if you're feeling very defensive or having strong feelings, yes, it's very difficult, but reminding yourself that this is the person I love and care about. I would never want to speak to them with words that are harsh or hurtful because I can't take it back. Softening your startup. So from, the Gottmans did a lot of research in the early years, and this was like in the 70s. like 70s, 80s. They did something called the Love Lab, which was basically bringing in newlyweds, and they hooked them up to some, oh gosh, I don't know what that's called. Just a heart rate monitor, and Dr. Gottman was able to predict after, a decade of doing that research, was able to predict divorce rates among the newlyweds within the first 3 minutes a conflict arose. Meaning, the first 3 minutes of any conflict is crucial, because if you present with contempt, criticism, defensiveness, or stonewalling or shutting down, those are factors that predict divorce. So if your argument often like escalates and you or your partner bring in criticism or contemptuous remarks, you can work with a couples therapist, right, to practice different skills. One is softening your startup. So what the gentle startup looks like is, first of all, speaking from your perspective, not talking about your partner, not blaming them, not talking about how they feel, only talking about your experience. So the gentle startup looks like, I felt humiliated, because of you making fun of me when I slipped and fell or something. Next time that happens, what I really need you to do is ask if I'm okay. So that's a way that you, one, focus on your own feelings and experience, and you don't talk about your partners, because again, you don't know what they're feeling. You can't read their minds. And no matter what, you can't say they felt a certain way if they didn't or they did. That's just their experience, just like you have your own experience of every situation. So that's what we want to talk about and focus on. Accepting your partner's influence. We sort of touched on this a little bit ago in terms of where we talked a little bit about friendship and the 3 pillars. Part of in conflict is accepting your partner's influence can be really helpful as a way to not get defensive, to be interested, to be understanding, willing to listen. So in a lot of studies, research has found that relationships often succeed to the extent that the husband can accept influence from the wife. So this is really critical, because from decades of research, women often accept their husband's influence. They have a natural ability to do that, and men struggle with that greater. So for instance, a wife could come home and say, do you have work Friday? My mom's coming into town. I could use some help getting the house ready. And the husband replies, my plans are set, not changing them. Right. That's a really very simple example of an inability to accept influence, rather than vice versa. Because this is crucial, because in the research, it shows that women are naturally well practiced in accepting influence from male partners. And of course, this is with heterosexual couples. It's a little bit different with same-sex partners, but still really remains the same with women. Accept influence from their partner much easier. So this is something that can be a little tricky, but oftentimes very easy if you're willing and able to accept, okay, there's something important about this, right? In this situation of, hey, mom's coming into town, could use your help. Obviously there's a need there, right? It's like inclusion. I want you to be a part of this. I want you to feel like I'm supported, right? So there's always a rhyme and reason to what we're asking. Having high standards. This is a really interesting one when I was putting this together, because sometimes I think people think high standards, it's like, oh, maybe unrealistic expectations. What this really means is that in good relationships, couples who have high expectations know how they should be treated. They refuse to accept hurtful behavior and have low to no tolerance for bad behavior from the start of the relationship. And this is also backed by research that couples who have high expectations of their partner and what a relationship should be do not accept bad behavior, abusive behavior, lack of kindness, neglect, things like that. Because the expectation is that I should be treated with kindness, affection, love, respect, loyalty, and equality. And again, couples who are successful, supported by research, have high expectations of their partners. They don't tolerate emotional or physical abuse or neglect. They just don't, because they say I'm worth more. My expectation is that my partner should offer me these kind of core conditions, right? Kindness, love, and affection, and respect, right? Those should be deal breakers, non-negotiables. Successful couples, again, this is another tool that you guys can take away with you, is learning to repair and exit. Exit strategy. Happy couples, right? Like I said, the masters have 5-to-1 ratio, again, for positive to negative interaction. So 5 times to 1 negative, right? And they've learned over time how to repair during conflict so that they grow emotionally close together and not feeling out of control. So again, this could look very different for every couple. It's not to say like this is right, this is wrong. So some couples use humor. Sometimes that's appropriate, sometimes not. But again, it doesn't really matter unless your partner feels like they're accepting that repair and they're like, yep, okay, we're good. I understand how hard this could be for you, right? So validating your partner. We're in this together, we'll figure it out, right? That's kind of a like we mentality, right? So sometimes that can be a repair attempt of like, you're not alone, I'm here with you, let's figure this out together. So it doesn't feel like your partner is sitting there like, oh, I have to figure this out all by myself. My partner's not there for me. And this is saying like, no, we're going to do this together. And know when to back off. This is the exit strategy part. Happy couples and successful couples know when to pick their battles. They know when to back off too and not persist on something if it's either for a lot of reasons. It's not super important. It's not a deal breaker. You have a preference on it. It's not really, you're not strong either way. But again, like if an argument gets too heated, right, you get too overwhelmed, you get too emotional, research has supported that partners need to take a 20 to 30 minute break minimum, and then agree on a time when they're come back to approach the topic again when you're both calm. And that's super important, the agree on a time to come back, because I have so many couples who say, oh, well, we'll take a break, but we never come back and talk about it. It's like, well, but that's avoiding conflict, right? You have to come back because it'll bubble over and eventually it gets too out of hand where you've got conflict upon argument building up and it's too great to break down. And it makes it much more difficult to, right, build that connection again. Not impossible, but it's challenging. It's much harder, right? Because that, in a way, when you avoid conflict, it deteriorates your relationship over time because you're not addressing things that need to be addressed. And it's just kind of like open wounds that don't have, like antibiotics. And asking your partner for a positive need. So this is a really easy way. If you're asking your partner to do something different or asking them to do something for you, some people, I won't say most, some people do the tactic of, I want you to stop doing this. No. Change it into a positive need. I would like it if you did this. It just goes off so much better, believe me, because when you say stop doing this, most partners hear I'm doing something wrong and they're blaming me. When you say, I really would like it if you did this, it comes off a lot softer. See the gentle approach? It comes off softer. You're making a request. You're not demanding. Like, stop doing that. That sounds like a demand, right? Your partner is not going to be as willing to do whatever it is you're asking unless it's a request, right? That you're requesting, hey, I'm asking, could you please do this instead? Or, I need this. And then focusing on the positives. So like we mentioned with the golden ratio, remember from earlier where I said 5-to-1, right? It's not to say I don't want you to keep tabs, because remember, that's not a good sign, but it's just to articulate or illustrate how many positive encounters happy and successful couples have compared to how many negative encounters they have, right? It's much greater ratio, which allows for more closeness and allows for more bonding, more friendship. A rich positive climate. This is another really good one. Successful and happy couples often have a positive climate, meaning they have a really good positive feelings about their partner. They're like gushing, like oohing and awing about this person, right? Like, my partner is so great. They're so helpful and kind and blah, 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 blah. Right? They have such a rich climate of positivity between the two of them. And it's not to say like this is toxic positivity, that like all things are good all the time. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you have a positive perspective of your relationship and your partner, that you love them, you care about them, what they say matters, you respect them, you're loyal to them. If negativity creeps into your relationship, that's also a red flag of, if your partner, let's say, drops, I did this earlier with my partner. I'm very clumsy. I drop things a lot. And I think I dropped like a Tupperware, and, things flew everywhere. One thing my partner could say is like, she's so clumsy. She's such a klutz. Like, roll his eyes internally. And he might say this to himself, not even out loud, right? That is such a good example of a negative climate, because your automatic thought about your partner is, they're clumsy, she's a klutz, she's messy, right? Those are all criticisms of your partner. On the other hand, if you had a positive climate with your partner, you might say, oh, that's an accident. She didn't mean to do that. This isn't purposeful. Right? That gives you a positive perspective on your partner, which helps you to stay interested, not get defensive, right? You see where this is kind of all tying together. Paying attention to how you describe your relationship, like I said, this kind of leads in, like, we laugh a lot together. I have fun with my partner. We love spending time together. We have the same interests, things like that. And the Gottmans talk about something that I really love. It's called the emotional bank account. You can kind of think of it like a piggy bank, right? Or like a regular bank account. When you have good interactions, right? You have positive interactions, you have fun, you laugh together, you have good conflicts that go through, and you have good discussions about it. Those are deposits into like your emotional bank account as a couple. Withdrawals happen when you have something maybe devastating happen, right? You have a loss of a family member. You have a conflict that goes really bad, right? You kind of erupt or yell at each other and it doesn't end well. You miss each other, right? Maybe miss attempts to connect. Those are all little, right, withdrawals. But the more you deposit into your bank account, think about it that way, right? When you have more money in your bank account, you have more cushion when, you get hit with a debt or you get hit with something that takes money out of it. Kind of goes back to the golden ratio again. You got to plump positive encounters. So when this negative encounter happens, you're good. It's not breaking your relationship. It's not coming to invade it, because you're strong. You've got that strength between the two of you. So we're wrapping up on the webinar here. I left my contact information, my phone number. That's also the office number. I left my extension as well as my email. So if you guys want to work with me, I'm still taking new clients and couples. So I would love to work with you guys if you guys are interested. I do have limited availability because, like I said, I'm also a doctoral student. So I do have very limited time, but I do have time available. Mark is I think I'm going to send out here's the Google form in the chat for everybody. So if you guys want to, let me see, how do I do this? There we go. So we have everybody fill feedback forms from our webinars just to get feedback on if it was productive, helpful, the speaker, all that good stuff. I just attached it in the chat. So if you guys want to fill it out, we're going to randomly select one couple or person to get a free 30-minute consult, which is usually about $100. So free 30-minute consult, not too bad. That's what I'm offering for anybody who fills it out, and we just randomly select somebody to get that. So would really appreciate you guys filling that out just so I get some feedback on how this presentation was and if it was helpful. And yeah, so right now I'll take questions. If you guys have anything that you want to ask, you can either unmute yourself and just ask, or type it in the chat, and I'll spend the next, I think we have about 10, 15 minutes left to take questions if you guys have any.
Hi, I think I'm gonna be the first one.
Sure.
So I was wondering, what are the proven differences between how a woman handles a relationship and how a man handles a relationship in straight couples?
Good question. So there's a myth out there. There's a lot of myths in relationships. So one of them is that men are sort of built for relationships more than women are, which I don't really know where that myth comes from, but it's one that we learn about in our couples training. That's not true. Both men and women are built. Using that word loosely because I'm not sure how they meant to say that, but both men and women are capable of handling conflict and communicating just as effectively. So not one gender over the other is better at doing that. The only thing they found, like I mentioned in the slides, is that men tend to have a more challenging time than women inherently at accepting their partner's influence in heterosexual couples. So women are naturally, I think, through societal norms, are just generally sort of much more readily influenced by their partners. And so it is not as difficult for them in conflict to accept their partner's influence in terms of their ideas, their feelings, their thoughts. Not to say that it's not challenging, it's just to say that it's much more inherently easier for women than it is for men. And that's, again, from decades of research has seen that. But other than that, there's really no discrepancies in terms of satisfaction, communication issues, conflict. Men and women are just as susceptible to any of those, problem areas. So there's really no difference. So I hope I answered your question, but I can elaborate if I haven't. Okay. Any other questions? I have about 10 minutes left. We got plenty of time. I left plenty of time for questions or concerns or comments or things that maybe you want to know more about, didn't see on here that I have some thoughts on. Oh, thank you. Okay, well, I'll be around for the next like 10 minutes, but if you guys have questions or just want to kind of talk to me one-on-one, happy to do that. But other than that, this is the end of our webinar. I believe this should be maybe recorded. I don't know. Marcus, our office manager, would know better, but I'm pretty sure this should be recorded and posted elsewhere. So if you will you be emailing the presentation? That's a good question. I think so. The presentation, like I said, I think should be recorded and it will be sent out to replay. So, okay, yes, Marcus, our office manager, said, yes, it will be recorded and it will be sent out. So you guys will have the presentation and also have the audio video link if you guys want to rewatch it. Like I said, I am taking on new couples. So if you are interested, please feel free to contact the office. Like I said, the number is here. You can even reach me via email if that's easier to make an appointment. You also can make appointments online, which makes it a lot easier for people because they can just look at my calendar and just jump on there. And like I said, if you fill out the feedback forms that I just included in the chat, we'll raffle for someone to get a free 30-minute consultation. So maybe you guys can get the first consultation appointment free. So it's an incentive. I appreciate you guys coming out and listening, and hopefully it was helpful and provided some input into kind of what helps make relationships stronger and some tips that you guys can take away and just kind of implement now. And again, seek help early. Happy to be here to help anybody if you guys need it. Oh, okay, we have a question. How exciting. Oh my gosh. You guys only got to saw a very small piece of my personality, but I am gung-ho about this topic. What do you think about the 5 love languages? Oh my gosh, love this question. Okay, so just some self-disclosure. My partner is a social worker, so we have had this conversation between the two of us on love languages. And it's really interesting because technically, some couples that take the inventory, it's very short. I think it's free. You can take it online. Will come out with maybe different ways that they show love and want to receive love. Excuse me. So, part of me really thinks that all of them are ways that we want to feel loved as human beings. The 5 love languages are words of affirmation, gift giving, acts of service, quality time, and physical touch. And technically, I guess all of them are things that we would want in a relationship, right? Or would be ideal. But certainly maybe there are 1 or 2 that we lean towards most as ways that we want to receive love from our partner. So the love languages can be a way to supplement and sort of see, hey, I'm an act of service kind of person. That's how I show and want to receive love. But maybe my partner has words of affirmation. That's their love language. Maybe I need to work on affirming them or using compliments or things like that, because that's the way that they accept and know they're loved, right? And so that's kind of the intentionality of continuously working on your relationship, right? It's not always equal. Love languages are kind of the same. Like, you don't have the same one. You have to work at showing your partner the one that way they receive love, right? So that might take work because it might not be the way that you show it. So it might be a little harder. But that's part of being intentional with how we do that and ensuring that we are meeting our partner's needs emotionally so we stay close. But my partner and I joke, it's like we don't have any, we have all of them, but I don't know. It's just a personal thing. But really good question. Okie doke. Any other final questions or thoughts before we wrap up? Okie doke. Well, I appreciate all you guys coming out and listening to my chat. And we have these once a month. So next month's topic, I think, is on pride. So come join us again. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to email, call, and we will wrap up here. So take care, everyone, and hope you have a good rest of the evening and weekend. And thanks so much.